Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about cannabis lounges. There's a lounge in West Hollywood, a new one in San Francisco. Vegas is popping off, and I'm currently drafting a bill to overturn a Class C felony in Washington State to maintain and operate a marijuana lounge. That's moving forward, so looking forward to that in 2021. Dan Chemist with Good CBD Products is in California. He's going to be going to some of these cafes. He's on the line with us to talk all about marijuana lounges. Good morning, Dan.
Boots on the ground this morning, Chronic. I'm about 100 miles outside of Berkeley, heading towards San Francisco, where, as you know, they got some lounges, Mo Greens, etc. And then I'm off to West Hollywood. So I feel like I'm going to learn something from today's podcast.
Yeah, I mean, when I go to Vancouver, BC, I'm always kind of intrigued by what the Culture Lounge has to offer. That's Mark and Jody Emery's spot, as well as right next door, there's the new Amsterdam Cafe that has a smoke shop and dab lounge downstairs. What they're able to sell, what they can, I'm always intrigued by those opportunities. Culture Lounge has a nice little vending machine, so I kind of like that automation. Somehow they're still selling $5 dabs. Totally not legal, but again, I enjoy the loopholes and opportunities. There's 3 stories. The first one being the typical kind of head shop where you can buy some accessories. Then you go to the first level. They have a podcast room in there where they used to do their podcasts. And then if that's full, they'll open up the 3rd story. And then, right next door, they have the new Amsterdam Cafe, which has food there. So you can actually buy some food. They make it there. They have a head shop. So intrigued by the window into the soul of the community, if you will. And so you mentioned Mo's. Mo's is in San Francisco. So I'm kind of looking forward to your report on that. There's a lot of kind of analogies to the bar industry and going to a bar and just hanging out after work and enjoying a joint. And so I'm glad that kind of San Francisco is leading that charge. So I'm eager to hear what you have to report back on.
Question for you. So there you are. You see somebody leaving a roadside bar. They've gotten in their car and they're driving, right? And they're leaving the roadside bar and it's about 6:30 in the afternoon. Okay? Do you worry more about that driver or the driver that's leaving the Cannabis Cafe at 6:30 in the afternoon after hanging out for an hour?
I think there's probably more stereotypes against the Cannabis Cafe leaving and being impaired. And that's actually one of the biggest headways that we have writing this bill right now for Washington State's marijuana lounge is impaired driving. There's a huge lobbyist group that doesn't want smoking indoors at all. That's fine. We can talk about vaping indoors and smoking outdoors, but the argument for impaired driving is definitely there. And that's one of the biggest advocates or headwinds against legalizing this. And so when you compare the data state by state, I think conclusively we're seeing in every single state that has regulated cannabis a massive decrease in binge drinking, DUIs, car accidents, and everything. So contrary to what the concern is, we're actually seeing an improvement for impaired driving due to the release of medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, and hopefully cannabis cafes.
I'm not an analyst in that kind of data. I spend most of my time working on, business development and such. But personally, I just find it interesting how the happy hour pub or local bar or watering hole or whatever you want to call it, how that's been normalized, right? How somebody can, stop by on the way home from work or whatever, pound 3 beers, go out, jump in their rig and drive away, and nobody gives a blink. And at the same time, the concern that, oh my God, you're going to go get super high and drive. It's just, society's got a lot to learn, Travis.
It's true. We were trying to create opportunities to get people to be able to go and consume in a safe place. So if you're an adult care facility and it's federally subsidized, you don't have anywhere to go. If you're a renter, you don't have anywhere to go. If your wife won't let you smoke in the house, I don't have anywhere to go. And then my neighbors complain when I'm in the backyard. It's kind of annoying. But yeah, we need a place, right? And there needs to be these business opportunities to allow us to go and consume and normalize the industry. So there are revenue opportunities. And so pushing the barrier, the envelope to have something similar to the alcohol industry where you have tasting rooms. I have streamlined Washington's bill so that we can at least open our doors. So there won't be any sales, there won't be on-site consumption for vendors to be able to hand out stuff yet. So it's kind of in waves or stages. Vegas, for example, wanted to have alcohol. That immediately had a moratorium for 1 to 2 years. So they're going to have to sit on that because they tried to implement too much at the same time. So with Washington State, what we're going to try and do is at least open up the doors, and then secondly, offer special events and tours so that you can have a concert or whatever and then consume, as well as tourism. And that's the thing with a lot of these lobbyists and bureaucrats, if you will, is they're looking at this from the point of view of tourism money and not from the locals who literally don't have a place to go. It's almost entrapment when you're going to sell a product and then not give them a place to go and smoke it. We have tours at these ship cruises that come into Seattle, and there's literally a line right before the cruise ship leaves so that people can go and buy their products. And where are they going to smoke it? On the boat?
Well, right. I mean, it encourages civil disobedience. Again, a set of laws that really puts you in a place where you're like, well, geez, I don't want to break the law, but gosh, you're making it awfully hard for me not to, right? And then the ongoing presence of rules changing too, right? So when do you think we're going to have that bill presented, and what's like a timeline for something like that to actually work in Washington? How long before I got to come back, brother?
So I submitted the bill to the Cannabis Alliance. It's a lobbyist group here in Washington. I got some feedback fairly late. I had to wait about 3 or 4 weeks before I got any feedback because of this vape gate. The vape debacle in Washington State has been taking a precedence. Unfortunately, the cafe took a back seat, and we missed our window of opportunity. It should have been, when I handed it in the very beginning of October, that should have been a 3-week turnaround and hit our lobbyists with House and Senate sponsors shortly thereafter, so that Q1 2020, it would already have its awareness and hit the floor and be voted on. Because of the vape gate, it's been pushed out a year. Good news, bad news. Good news is we're going to have this thing done, right? So it's going to have an opportunity to be edited and submitted by the end of the year, which gives us an entire year for lobby days, where we as a group go down to Olympia, the state capital, and lobby. And so we'll be taking this bill with talking points. And so that's going to be drumming the beat to get everyone to pay attention to this bill. So they're going to know by the end of the year who we are, what we're doing. And I think that will help get it passed. Unfortunately, it's going to be a year late.
Hey, since we're the Talking Hedge, your cannabis business podcast, at some point, can we do a podcast on those processes?
I would like to do a podcast on the process of lobbying. There needs to be standard operating procedures, and there are not. I haven't seen any, and so I'm going to try and develop that. And so maybe that'll be a segment or an episode on how to do that, because there is some benefit. In Vegas, we're seeing what we want to do in Washington State. We're seeing that now where there's on-site consumption for dispensaries. So that could be an option too, because with a real estate investment trust or a REIT, what we've seen in Washington State is a lot of these head shops are opening up right next to the rec shop. So these adjacent head shops, in my opinion, are not there to circumnavigate 280E. That's a tax provision that doesn't allow for cannabis products to have a write-off. So people are opening up shops next door. Doubling the retail store and doubling your employees and all of your property, plant, and equipment footprint is not why people are doing this. It's not to avoid 280E. It is for cannabis cafes. That is a strategy play to open up an adjacent head shop. And so I've had a lot of pushback from retailers writing this bill. There's definitely lobbyist groups that want to have a dispensary model, just like Vegas, where you can go to a dispensary and consume. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this. There's a lot of opportunities, and everyone's been doing it differently. I've covered 8 different states on their bills. I really like Alaska and Oregon. They've incorporated a lot of interesting things. I didn't want to get into politics, but this is really the only way in the last 5 years to move this forward. And so I'm optimistic that next year, 2021, we'll have this thing nailed down, if not by fourth quarter of 2020.
How does that gig pay? You getting well paid working on that bill?
That bill I probably have since March. The last 7-8 months I've put in maybe 100 hours. I've been paid $0. And so I think that's less than minimum wage, but I have learned a lot. I didn't want to really get into politics. I've learned a lot more than I wanted to, but nonetheless, that's opportunities. So I think once we nail this down, then we can take this model elsewhere and kind of expand the Seattle Super Chronic Cafe. So with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.